Hi, it's Steph, and I'm at Lowe's, and we're going to check out a different store today than I normally go to. And the first thing that I noticed is that they have a load of clearance. So let's go ahead and explore a different Lowe's and see what they have in stock for the August inventory. So here on this rack, it looks like they have a lot of annuals, but one thing that you can do with these marigolds is update your containers for the fall. Marigolds make a great transitional plant, and I would actually prefer these over mums because if you deadhead them, they just keep blooming and blooming. And they have some orange ones as well as some yellow. And it looks like these are $8.98, so they would be $4 for the 6-pack here. And they're still being watered. It feels pretty heavy, and they look to be in good shape. Some vinca. Now I'm growing vinca for the first time this year, and I'm really impressed with it. I love it. It bushes out so well, grows great, and it's drought resistant. If I forget to water it one day, no big deal. It still bounces back and does great. So this looks like it is maybe looks like a 12-pack. $13.98, so it would be $7. So if you need a summer refresh of your containers, they still have lots of annuals on the clearance rack. And then they also have some shrubs. So let's go ahead and take a look at what they have for shrubs. So this here looks like a potentilla. It's a hypericum. So it's a little bit different, but very similar. Perhaps it's part of the same family. It has flowers that look very similar to the St. John's wort flowers. And let's see what it does here. So this is a mounted grower, has silver green foliage. And it is hardy in zones 4 through 7, and it gets to be 2 to 3 feet in height and 4 to 5 feet in width. Deer resistant and drought tolerant. So it gets yellow blooms, it looks like. This one is all bloomed out at the moment because you can see that the buds are all going to seed, but the foliage still looks really healthy. And this shrub here is a first edition shrub. It was $27.98, so at 50% off, it would be about $14. And on the side of the hypericum, they have this Semfalspirea, Sorbaria subrifolia sem. I actually have this one in my garden, and the new growth in the spring is stunning. Now, I will tell you that this has a really beautiful fern-like texture, gorgeous shrub, but it does send out runners. So if you don't want a shrub that you're going to have to pull runners from, this might not be a good choice. But if you can plant it in a spot that you don't care if it gets large and wild, it is stunning. So it will start with this beautiful spring color that has shades of chartreuse and pink and orange, just gorgeous. Yellow, and then it will transition to green, and when it transitions to green, it will have these spikes of white blooms. It doesn't show you any more pictures, but the little blooms are like plumy and soft and fuzzy. They almost look like little pearls. Gorgeous. So I really love this shrub. I love that it looks like a fern, a really large fern in my flower bed. So I think it's great. So it likes part sun to sun. Mine is planted in full afternoon sun. It gets to be, let's see, it says 4 to 6 feet in height and 4 to 6 feet in width. I do have to prune mine to keep it size controlled for the spot that I have it in my bed. Very easy to do so with a prune in fall, usually is when I do it. And it is hardy down to 50 degrees Fahrenheit. So USDA growing zones 2 through 11. Very hardy. And this one here is $46.98. So at 50% off, it would be about $23.50. And a spirea. Now what's cool about this spirea is that it has larger foliage. Generally the spireas that you see are like the ones that you see here. They have a bit of a smaller leaf. But this one is called the pink sparkler birch leaf spirea. So that characteristic of the large leaf is called the birch leaf spirea. And it looks like it will have a really pretty pink bloom. And it likes full sun to part shade. And it has medium water needs. It gets to be 3 to 4 feet in height and width and deer resistant. Now I have several varieties of spirea in my garden. I do find them to be deer resistant. I also find that they're pretty drought tolerant once they are established. And they have those beautiful blooms that come on at some point during the season that the pollinators just love. I really like spirea a lot. And so this one here is also a first edition shrub, and it was $27.98 at 50% off. It would be about $14. And this one here is a potentilla. So this one here is the Creme Brulee Potentilla by First Edition Shrubs. And it gets to be 3 to 5 feet in height and 2 to 3 feet in width and hardy in zones 2 through 6. Now this is a plant that I initially thought was a perennial because the growth is pretty soft. But this one here you can see that the branching is starting to harden up, more characteristic of a shrub. But here are what the blooms look like. A really sweet small bloom. And this Creme Brulee variety is this off-white ivory color. They also come in shades of pink and in yellow, and a few more spireas that are on clearance. And you can see how in good shape these look. They've been well taken care of. The soil is still moist, so they're being watered, and the foliage still looks nice and green. And perfect time to pick up shrubs on clearance as we head into the tail part of the summer where the weather will start cooling off and you'll be ready for some fall planting. So this one here is also by First Editions. It is the Superstar Spirea, and it gets pretty pink blooms, green leaves, and it looks like the new growth might have a bit of a red coloring. And it is a full sun shrub with dark green foliage, medium water needs, and it says that it is hardy in zones 3 through 8, and it gets to be 2 to 3 feet in height and 3 to 4 feet in width, deer resistant. So another pretty compact size spirea. And all of these are $27.98, making them about $14.50. And here is another spirea. This green looks a little bit brighter. That one looks a little bit darker. And let's see what variety this is. This one is called Little Spark. Also has pink blooms, and it is compact. Oh, this one's even smaller in growth habit, 18 to 24 inches in height and 18 to 30 inches in width. Deer resistant, drought tolerant, 3 through 8. So some good shrubs to be found here on the clearance rack at this Rainham, Massachusetts location, Lowe's. And some Easy Elegance roses on the clearance rack as well. If you like roses in your garden and maybe you haven't had luck with the English roses or tea roses in the past, these shrub roses are usually a bit easier to deal with. So this one here is the Easy Elegance, and it's called Mystic Fairy, and it has these sweet red blooms. There's actually a couple of blooms on this one here, so let's check it out. Look at that. So they're a smaller bloom, very similar to, say, a drift rose. And let's see how big these get. So it says that they are fuss-proof. Growing beautiful roses is no longer a thorn in your side. Oh, isn't that cute? All right, so this one here likes full sun. Most roses like full sun in a very well-draining soil. If they have too much moisture, too much humidity, which is very common here in the Northeast, you will start getting some black spot and yellow leaves, similar to what you see here. So regardless of how resistant the rose says that it is, depending on your growing zone, it can always be susceptible to some of those diseases. So it says here that it gets to be 3 to 4 feet in height, 3 to 4 feet in width. So I would say that this is probably alongside of the growth habit of maybe a knockout rose. And these here are $16.98, so at 50% off they would be about $8.50 each. And they have some more of that Hypericum here, and this one is in bloom. Look at that. So yeah, the blooms remind me very much of the blooms on my St. John's wort. And the foliage color is very pretty on this shrub. And they have quite a few of them here. They also have some Walker's Low catmint on the clearance rack right up there. That still looks like it's in really good shape. So when you bring home one of these clearance plants, you would just give them a haircut. So cut them right back to maybe anywhere from about 4 inches or so is what I would do. Keep them watered, keep them in the shade, and go ahead and plant them out. And these will come back beautifully for you next year because they are perennial. So really great time to pick up perennials on clearance when they still look like they have life in them, like these here. So $15.98 would make them 50% off. So these would be about $8. And this clearance Walker's Low catmint, you can see here that this can very easily be divided into 2 perennials. Look at that. Right in the middle there, you can see that it looks like there's 2 plants here. One right here and one right there. So one plant for $8, you can get 2 plants out of this. So really great deal. What's great also about the catmint is that it is deer resistant, bunny resistant. It's part of the mint family, has a little bit of a fragrance, which is off-putting to the pests. And the pollinators absolutely love it. Has these really beautiful light purple blooms. Some salvia on clearance here. This is the Midnight Model Salvia. And salvia is another really great pollinator-friendly plant. Deer resistant, rabbit resistant, They don't like the fragrance of it, and the texture has these nice green leaves, and then it'll send up these bloom spikes of these gorgeous kind of violet, blue, purple colored blooms. And I have a video on my channel on how to prune your salvia to keep it blooming most of the season. So they do like full sun and a very well draining soil. If you have it sitting in too much moisture, they can get tall and maybe flop in the center or not bloom as well if they don't get enough sun. So they are also very hardy, down to a zone 3 or negative 30 degrees Fahrenheit. And they average in size from 18 to 24 inches in height and in width. And you can see it says here water wise because it is drought tolerant once established and deer resistant. So salvia is another really great workhorse staple perennial for the garden. And this would be $8 because anything over $15 is 50% off. So that is a great price. And again, another one that you can see in here can very easily be divided into several plants. You cut it right down the middle, get 1, 2 out of this. And some lilies. I really love Asiatic lilies. So there's the Asiatic lilies that are usually a little bit shorter in stature, and then you have the Oriental lilies that are a bit taller. And these are the shorter varieties. So they have 2 kinds here on the clearance rack. The Monrovia Tiny Nugget Asiatic Lily. It likes full sun, part sun, and it is perennial. And let's see, it's extreme cold hardy. It likes 6+ hours of sun per day, and this variety gets to be 14 to 16 inches in height and 10 to 12 inches in width. Hardy down to negative 30 degrees Fahrenheit. It looks like a yellow with a bit of a red speckling. And then there is this one here, which is the Tiny Shadow Asiatic Lily, which looks like it could be a red variety. And it also can do full sun, part sun, and has similar growth habit, 10 to 12 inches in height, 10 to 12 inch width. Hardy down to negative 30 degrees Fahrenheit. And both of these are $10.98, so they would be $7. And if you have a shade garden and you want to find some clearance plants, no problem. Look, they have some hosta. Now, one thing to note about hosta is that the deer really love it. So it's like deer salad. You want to be careful if you plant it and protect them from deer. And this variety here is the Bobber Ann Plantain Lily. It likes part shade, and hosta are also very drought tolerant once they are established. And they are very cold tolerant as well. This one here is hardy down to negative 30 degrees Fahrenheit. And they do best growing in part shade, so 1 to 3 hours of morning sun, because morning sun is a little bit less harsh than afternoon sun. If they get too much sun, like these might be getting here in the parking lot, they will start to crisp up a bit. So something to be aware of, but very hardy. Pick these up for about $7, plant them in your garden, and they will be beautiful next season. We're going to look at some regular priced plants, and then we'll go back to check out the clearance rack on the inside part of the garden center. So check out these beautiful Rudbeckias. Now, I love Rudbeckia, also known as Black-Eyed Susan, even though they have a brown center, right? You'd think they'd be called Brown-Eyed Susan, but a really great mid to late summer bloomer that will bloom for you through the very end of summer, almost as we get into fall. So this variety here is the Little Gold Star Rudbeckia, and it is a bit shorter variety. It blooms, it says here, summer and fall. And it is hardy down to a -4. So Rudbeckia is very hardy, down to negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit. And this variety gets to be 14 to 16 inches in height and in width. Now, I have a variety called Goldstrum in my garden, so they're a little bit taller, averaging about 24 to 30 inches in height and the same width, and they're really beautiful. But if you have a bed that you want to put something a little bit shorter, this would be a great option. And this pairs beautifully with purple flowers. So right now, when these start blooming, the alliums, the perennial clump alliums also start blooming. So this would make a beautiful companion to, say, the Millennium allium. I have mine paired with some Blue Fortune Agastache because it's a bit taller and they look so nice together. But because these are shorter, they would look so good with the allium, which is a similar height. So this one here is $15.98 and it likes full sun. And some beautiful yarrow, also known as Achillea. I absolutely love this perennial. This one here is called Sangria, and it's a bit of a red color, but it fades to pink. And what I love about this is that it will go through so many different color changes in the time that it is blooming. It usually starts off a darker color, and then it will continue to fade until you end up with something like this, which is really beautiful. Has kind of a ferny texture foliage, which pairs so nicely and contrasts well with other perennials in the garden. So this one here is called the Sassy Summer Sangria Yarrow. It is in one of the Lowe's house containers for $15.98. It's an upright perennial that likes full sun, and it's also one that does not like to sit in wet soil. So make sure that it is in a well-draining location that leans dry. And it is hardy down to -30 degrees or a zone 3. And I find it deer and rabbit resistant in my garden. Nothing seems to really bother it. And some phlox. Now this looks to be a shorter variety of phlox. Phlox is another really great kind of staple garden perennial. One issue that phlox is susceptible to is powdery mildew. So when you plant it, you want to make sure that you pay attention to the spacing requirements, because if you give it proper spacing, it'll improve the airflow, which will be better so that it's less likely to get the powdery mildew, which just looks like a white powdery substance on the foliage. So this one here is a really pretty light pink. And the name on this one is Garden Girl's Uptown Girl Garden. Well, that's a mouthful. And phlox does like full sun. There are some varieties like the woodland phlox that will like more shade, and even the creeping phlox can do with part shade, but these here like full sun. It is hardy down to a zone 3 or down to -30 degrees Fahrenheit. And this is what you should look at, the spacing. It says to space at 28 to 32 inches from other perennials. So I would certainly pay attention to spacing when it comes to plants like phlox and even bee balm or monarda. That is another one that's susceptible to powdery mildew. And it says it is deer resistant. Now I don't find that the deer munch on my phlox much. They have in the past, so I would say it's probably moderately deer resistant. And they also have this really pretty, very light kind of lavender purple. And this one is called Flame Blue Garden Phlox. This one looks like it might be just slightly taller than the other one, but maybe not. No, 12 to 18 inches in height, 12 to 14 inches in width, and also hardy down to a -30 degree Fahrenheit, zone 3. So these would make a great front of the border perennial. And both the pink and the purple phlox are in these 2.5 quart Lowe's brand containers for $8.98. And another prolific garden bloomer, Coreopsis, also known as tick seed. Now this perennial looks very similar to me to the annual Cosmo, just in a bit of a shorter and bushier form. You can see here the blooms are very similar. Now this is such a pretty shade of magenta. I know it's showing up more pink on camera, a magenta color. You can kind of see it a little bit better there. Very small, sweet blooms, tons of buds. So that is the thing with this plant. It is constantly blooming and blooming. And this variety here is the Monrovia Mercury Rising Coreopsis. And it gets to be 15 to 18 inches in height and 24 to 36 inches in width. And it blooms summer and fall, hardy down to -10 degrees Fahrenheit. And it is water wise, which means once it is established, it would be drought tolerant. So it's always great to add those low maintenance plants to our garden. And this one here is, let's see how much it was, $13.98. This is a pretty good sized perennial. So another one that you could likely divide right out of its nursery can. And another really pretty Coreopsis, a sunny yellow with almost like a burgundy center. And this one also is loaded with buds. And it is the Lilbang Enchanted Eve Coreopsis by Monrovia. $10.98 for this container. It's a little bit smaller than the other we just looked at. And it looks full sun and similar growth habit, I believe, in terms of height. Yes, no, this one's even shorter, 6 to 12 inches in height and 12 to 18 inches in width. And it is hardy down to -10 degrees Fahrenheit, blooms summer and fall. So this would be a great front of the border plant. And these sweet light purple blooms belong to this plant here, the Caribou Blue Campanella. Look at that. So sweet. This would look really pretty paired with yellow flowers. Another great front of the border plant because you can see that it is pretty short. So let's check out how tall it gets. So this says it's easy care, superior quality. It needs 3 to 6 hours of morning sun. So it is a part sun plant and it likes semi-moist soil, and it is 14 to 18 inches in height and 8 to 12 inches in width, hardy down to -10 degrees Fahrenheit, and it blooms spring and summer. It's really cute. And beautiful coneflowers. They are my favorite perennial in my garden. I absolutely love them, and so do the pollinators. Look at that sweet little bee getting a little snack. Now this variety here is the Monrovia Sombrero Lemon Yellow Coneflower, and it gets to be 18 to 24 inches in height and 18 inches wide, and it blooms summer and fall. Mine start blooming for me here in my Massachusetts Zone 6 garden in July, and they're hardy down to -20 degrees Fahrenheit. Now the one thing that coneflowers will not tolerate is wet soil. So you need to have a very well draining soil and full sun in order for them to do best. They are deer resistant in my garden. They don't touch them, and the yellow finches love them. They will come through and eat the seeds. So you can even leave these beautiful cones up for the winter to provide food for our wildlife friends. And the Sombrero Lemon Yellow Coneflower is $10.98. And another pollinator favorite is the blanket flower, or Gaillardia. And this one here is also a non-stop bloomer. And even when it is done blooming, look at these beautiful seed pods or seed heads. Isn't that pretty? So I think that the plant looks even pretty when the blooms are done and faded. You look like you have a plant of little pom-poms. People will be like, what is that cool plant you have there? And it is just what they look like when they're done blooming. And so this one here, if you have a hot colored garden and you like shades of oranges and yellows and reds, this would be a really sweet front of the border type perennial. And this one here is the Spin Top Orange Halo Blanket Flower by Monrovia. It likes full sun. It is a perennial. These are $10.98. And let's see how big it gets. Only 12 to 18 inches in height and 18 to 24 inches in width. And it is hardy down to -30 degrees Fahrenheit. And it blooms spring, summer, and fall. If you deadhead them, you will continue to get more blooms, but you can see here that this one has a bunch of buds getting ready to bloom as well. So a really prolific bloomer. And here is a beautiful plant that is very similar to the Black-Eyed Susan or the Rudbeckia, but it is called a Sunbeckia. And something to note about these is that they are beautiful and large and tempting to plant in your garden. But you should be aware of your gardening zone before you plant these out, because they are only hardy to a zone 7 or 10 to 0 degrees Fahrenheit. So they're not hardy in zones 1 through 6. Now I am in a zone 6B, 7A. So if I planted these in my garden, it would be a 50-50 shot as to whether or not they would return. So very important to be aware of your gardening zone, which you can find out just by going to Google and saying, what is my gardening zone? You'll put in your zip code and it'll let you know, so that you can make an informed decision when picking up perennial plants. Because nothing worse than picking up a plant that you feel was listed as perennial and then it not returning for you in your garden. And knockout roses. This is the variety that I grow in my garden, the pink double knockout. And it is a really beautiful rose, has done really well for me. Very low maintenance landscape shrub rose. All I do with it is I prune it in late winter, and then I feed it with some rose tone, which is a granular rose fertilizer, and it does beautifully. I get tons of blooms off of mine, and they're pretty much full size at this point because they've been planted for some time. So it says that they get to be 3 to 4 feet in height and 3 to 4 feet in width, and they're hardy in zones 5 through 11. And roses do love full sun while draining soil. And these are a number 2 container or 2 gallon for $25.98. And the fall would be a great time to start planting some roses for you to enjoy next season. These bloom for me at some point in May all the way through October when we get our first hard frost. So really prolific, long blooming rose. Some Russian sage, another plant that is purple in color, like a very light purple, part of the sage family, has a fragrance that the deer and rabbit do not like, and it is also really drought tolerant. So this is a plant that if you have an area that is dry, a rock garden, Russian sage would be a great option. And they've bred some varieties to actually be shorter now. So in the past, Russian sage has been a plant that has gotten really tall and gangly and has the potential to split in the center and look quite messy. But some of the new varieties are shorter in stature, so that would be less likely to happen. This one here is called the Blue Jean Baby Russian Sage. It likes full sun. It blooms in summer. These are $15.98, and it is hardy down to -20 degrees Fahrenheit. So very hardy, down to a zone 4, and it is deer resistant. And this one here gets to be 28 to 34 inches in height and 36 inches in width, where some of the older varieties get upwards of 4 feet in height. And if you prefer red roses, they also have the red knockout roses, and all of these look really healthy, really nice looking roses, and they have a ton of new growth. This is what the roses will do throughout the whole growing season. They will push out new buds and new growth that is red in color. They also have some of the bloomables roses and some pretty colors. This one here is the Romantica Ball Gown. Very pretty. It is a hybrid tea rose, gets to be 6 feet in height, 2 to 3 feet in width. And the growing these will be the same across the board. Full sun, well-draining soil. They also have Bolero, which is a Floribunda type rose. It gets 3 to 4 feet in height, 2 to 3 feet in width. That is really pretty. Oh, it shows a bowl of lemons. I wonder if it smells like lemon. Let's test it out. It does. It has a very nice fragrance of lemon. Scentables, fragrant blooms. Very nice. One that I bought myself this summer is this Sweet Mademoiselle. It also has a very nice fruity fragrance in a pretty coral colored rose. Very, lots of petals, very frilly bloom. Look at that. It's a hybrid tea rose in peachy pink coloring, and it also gets to be about 5 feet in height. Lots of shrubs and evergreens. I can't believe how well stocked this Lowe's is compared to the last one that I went to. So this is great. Let's see what they have. And here is the Monrovia Cream de Mint Dogwood, and it is very similar to a variety I have growing in my garden called the Ivory Halo Dogwood. Now, these dogwoods are grown for their winter interest, but this one has an added bonus that it has these really pretty variegated leaves. Now, in the winter, dogwoods will get these really bright colored twigs, so their branching structure will either go really bright yellow or really bright red, and it is really stunning in the winter. You can use them to cut for winter arrangements, for Christmas arrangements and decorating. Really pretty. So the one that I have, the Ivory Halo, turns red. I'm not sure what color these twigs will turn because during the growing season they mostly look green, and then once they lose their foliage they will start to color up. But maybe the tag will give us some information. These are $52.98 each. And they are hardy in zones 3 through 8 or down to -40 degrees Fahrenheit, and they get to be about 4 to 5 feet tall and wide. And it likes moist soil but not soggy and part to full sun. Now I have mine planted in a part shade location because I found that sometimes the leaves would burn up if they were getting too much sun, and they seem to be doing pretty well. But dogwoods in general do like a moist soil. And let me see what it says in terms of the color. Chartreuse stems that add character to the winter landscape. So it looks like the branches will lean more yellow. Really pretty shrub. And Luthicoi, and I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I did practice a little bit. I became familiar with this shrub last season, planted one in my garden in the fall, and the variety that I have is Gerard's Rainbow. So it is a variegated type, but it also gets this really pretty kind of pink new growth, and I've been really enjoying it. So this is a evergreen shrub, so it'll stay like this for you all winter with the new growth having this really pretty color. And this variety here is, let's see, this is a Monrovia shrub. Here is the information on the Rejoice Coast Luthicoi. It is a part sun shrub with dramatic foliage, multi-season beauty, and it likes part sun. It is hardy in zones 6 through 9 or down to -10 degrees Fahrenheit, and it is moderate growing, getting to be 2 to 3 feet tall and wide, so pretty compact shrub. Some pugster butterfly bushes, and while I've seen mostly the blue and the amethyst this season over at the Home Depot, here at Lowe's they have the pink variety and the white. Now these are a compact version of the buddleia or the butterfly bush, and you can see that it has lots of blooms on it. So all of these blooms that are done, you can just go through and cut them off to deadhead and clean up the plant, and it will keep producing more blooms for you, as you see here and here and here, throughout the whole growing season. Now these are slow to get going in the spring. I find that they only start blooming really kind of like late spring heading into summer, but then they will continue to bloom and bloom until you get your first hard frost. And I find the blooms very fragrant. They smell like lilacs to me. But a really pretty shrub, and this version, the pugster, is compact. So these get to be So traditional butterfly bushes get to be pretty tall and pretty wide. These here stay 2 to 3 feet tall and wide, and they're hardy in zones 5 through 9. Now I lost mine because I had them planted in soil that stays too moist, and it rotted and it died and didn't return after winter. So they like a very well-draining soil that leans dry and a full sun location. Some more spirea. This is the Lil Bang by Proven Winners, and you can see how beautiful and healthy this foliage looks. And it gets some pink blooms. It's the Double Play Big Bang. And this one here gets to be 2 to 3 feet tall and wide. It needs 6+ hours of sun a day. Hardy in zones 3 through 8. And it has colorful foliage and blooms. And there they are in that pink coloring. And look how pretty that new growth is. 2-gallon container for $27.98. And evergreens, which would be great to plant in the fall so that you can get ready for some winter interest in your garden. It's always great to have these structural plants that stay this way all year round so that your garden always has something pretty to look at, even when your perennial plants are dormant. So this one here is the Monrovia Vintage Gold False Cypress. It is $49.98. It has this really pretty kind of ferny, loose sort of texture. And this one looks like it could get some gold coloring to it. So in order for it to have the most golden color, you want to make sure to plant it in full sun. And the size on this one gets to be 4 feet tall by 4 feet wide, and it is hardy in zones 4 through 8 or down to negative 30 degrees Fahrenheit. And some really cool Hinoki topiaries. Look at that. So someone has taken the time to grow these really tall and to shape them into a topiary. I love Hinoki. I have quite a few in my garden. And this one here, because it is a specimen, is going to be a little bit more expensive at $129. It likes full sun, and this is the Gracilis Hinoki Cypress. I have one of these in my garden just growing freeform, and it is gorgeous. And this one here says that it will get 6 feet height, 6 feet width, but because it is shaped like a topiary, you would just have to go ahead and prune it once in a while to keep its shape. You don't want it to grow into a bush because you're paying for this form that they have trained it into. Check this out. They have one of these new release dark foliage hydrangeas by First Editions. This is called the Eclipse hydrangea, and it is a big leaf hydrangea with dark foliage. It is stunning. Look at that. So beautiful. It almost looks black. So here is the information on the Eclipse Big Leaf Hydrangea. It says why you'll love it. Intense dark purple leaves hold their color even in sunny warm climates. Dark purple or cranberry colored blooms make dramatic impact and perfect as a focal point in the garden or in decorative containers. And it says full sun, 3 to 5 feet in height and 3 to 5 feet in width. And it is hardy in zones 5 through 9. $29.98 for this 2-gallon container, and it is the only one left, so it looks like this is going to be a hot seller. Panicle hydrangeas. Now, panicle hydrangeas are beautiful. They're a little bit later blooming than, say, the big leaf or the mop head type hydrangeas, and they can usually tolerate more sun. And look at these beautiful large blooms. Now, this is a first edition shrub called Little Hottie, and the Little Hottie to me is very similar to, say, the Little Lime hydrangea, which is the smaller limelight version of Proven Winners. And look how pretty that is. So pretty. And this one here likes full sun to part shade. It gets to be 3 to 5 feet tall and 3 to 5 feet wide, and it is hardy in zones 3 through 8. So really pretty. I have a hedge of the little lime hydrangeas that is looking glorious at the moment in my garden, and I absolutely love it. So this Little Hottie looks very similar. $28.98 for this 2-gallon container. And some sky pencil hollies. I really like these because I feel like they provide really nice vertical structure. I am yet to add some to my garden, but I'm always looking for a spot where I can put some. I think they would even look great in some tall planters. I actually have some corten steel planters that I'm growing some bamboo in, and if I can find another spot for some, I think these would be great to grow in a container. As of course, if the container is large enough and holds enough soil to keep these evergreens happy. But these have a very contemporary kind of structure. I feel like their growth habit being very tall and narrow is really pretty for, say, like a Zen garden, or even if you have like a modern style garden. And so this one here is the Sky Pencil Japanese Holly, and it likes full sun. $34.98 for these. So that's actually a great price. These look like they're maybe a 2-gallon, and they are, let's see, they get 6 to 8 feet in height, 1.5 feet in width. I think they get quite bigger than that. So I would say that they probably can get maybe 8 feet in height, but I would say they get 3 to 4 feet in diameter, because I have seen some that are pretty mature. And they're hardy down to a zone 6, and really great evergreen. One tip that I will give you about these that I've seen happen in the past is because they have a tendency to split in the center, you don't want to have them, say, in the corner of the house where you might get snowfall on them in the winter. If you do, you might want to wrap them in burlap to keep them together so that they don't split in the center and get damaged. Very similar to, say, snow load on like a boxwood. They also have some Lowe's brand containers of the Gold Mop Cypress. This is probably one of my favorite shrubs that I purchased at the box store in my garden. I have about 3 of them now, and one of them actually got too big for the space that I had it in, so I limbed it up and made it a small topiary tree. And I do have a video on my channel on how I did that, but these are really great. They usually have more of a yellow coloring. My guess is that these were a little bit shaded, so they look a little more green. So what will happen is if you have it in more shade, it will be more green, similar to what you see on the inside of the leaves. but I find this a really great shrub and I like it a lot. So the lemon thread false cypress, you can see how it has a really pretty kind of graceful arching habit. It is an accent or landscape highlight shrub. $32.98 for this. It likes full sun and it gets to be 3 to 5 feet in height, 2 to 4 feet in width, and hardy down to a zone 4 or negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit. Really pretty texture on this one. And the better boxwood. So this is becoming more widely available. Now, boxwood was plagued with boxwood blight. A couple of years ago, it became a widespread issue, and it's a disease that boxwood get that you have to remove all of your boxwood. So this particular boxwood has been bred to be more resistant to boxwood blight. So it actually says right here, disease-resistant foundation plants, introducing better boxwood. And they have two varieties that I've seen. The Heritage, which gets 3 to 4 feet high and 2 to 3 feet wide, and the Babylon Beauty, which gets 3 feet high and 3 to 5 feet wide. So you can see there's a little bit of difference in size when it comes to these better boxwood. The Babylon Beauty being a little bit larger than the Heritage. And you can prune these into whatever size you prefer. And they're hardy in USDA growing zones 5 through 9. Both of them. And these are $16.98 for what looks to be a little bit under a 1 gallon container. Another one of my favorites, the Blue Star Juniper. Look at this gorgeous blue color. So pretty. This is the perfect evergreen for a front of a border because it is low growing and slow growing. I have had a couple of these planted in my garden for about 12 years now, and they are about 3 by 4 in diameter and only about 18 inches or so in height. Full sun will give you this most vibrant blue color, and it is hardy down to a zone 4. Down to negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit, and it is deer resistant. The deer do not touch this in my garden. So we're heading into fall, friends, and it is the perfect time to plant some evergreens in the garden. $21.98 for these containers. They look to be just under a 2 gallon. In the fall, planting is great because the soil is still relatively warm from the summer, so it'll be easy for your roots to develop on your plants. And also we naturally get more moisture, which means less watering on your part. So really great time to plant. And check out all of these heucheras. They are coral bells is another name for them. They have their bloom spikes up. So coral bells and heucheras do bloom. And in fact, it looks like the bees really like their blooms because there is a little bee right there. Look at that. All over the bloom spikes on these heucheras. So this is a really great plant for shade, to add color in a shady spot. Now, most people, when they think of a shade garden, they really go right to hostas because it's kind of what we've learned over the years, but there are so many options to have a nice colorful shade garden, and this is through use of foliage, and here's a great plant to use for that purpose. Now let's see what variety this is. Pinot Gris Coral Bells. And this one looks like it's a red leafed foliage, spring and summer interest, $19.98. And this is a really large one. You can actually see where there's a good division point right here, right in the center. You can get 2 plants out of here. Part shade, morning sun would be best. And this one here gets to be 8 to 12 inches in height and 12 to 14 inches in width. When it comes to coral bells and heuchera, they come in all different sizes, colored foliage, so many options to choose from. There's actually this one here that is a bit of a green coloring, very similar to, say, the spearmint. And you can cut these off. You can cut these bloom stalks off after they're done blooming, or if you don't like them and you just want to keep a nice mounded clump of foliage. Now let's see what name this one is. Well, there's no tag on it, but that's a really pretty colored leaf. And here is some of the Primo Black Pearl by Proven Winners. I actually have this one in my garden. It has gotten quite small over the years. I don't have a whole lot of luck growing heucheras. For some reason, they will be nice and large like this when I plant them, and then they will start to get smaller and smaller over the subsequent seasons. I haven't quite figured out why that is, but I keep working on it. But I really love the dark foliage on this one. That is stunning. And look how pretty it looks paired with, say, this Japanese fern right on the side of it. Isn't that gorgeous? So this is how you add a lot of beautiful color to your shade gardens, friends, through use of foliage, color, and texture. I actually recently made a video showing some of my favorite plant, shade plant combinations on my channel that I can link below. This is the Crested Surf by Proven Winners. It's a really pretty Japanese painted fern. It likes part shade. Now, ferns do like a good deal of shade. If you give them too much sun, they will get really crispy, kind of like that. So you want to avoid that. So to keep them looking nice and healthy like this, good amount of shade, good amount of moisture, I feel like is what helps them grow best. So these here are medium size, 20 to 22 inches in height, and they're hardy in zones 3 through 8 or down to negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Now I will tell you, I'm having an issue with bunnies munching on my ferns this year. They're eating them and they're just leaving these stems but eating all the leaves. So I've had to put my Dollar Tree wastebasket cloches back up on them. But back to this coral bell here. The Primo Black Pearl is $12.98, and the price on the crested fern was $12.98 as well. And the Primo Black Pearl is short, 8 to 10 inches in height, needs 26-inch spacing, and it is hardy in zones 4 through 9 or down to negative 30 degrees Fahrenheit. And some limelight hydrangea trees. Now, once in a while, you will come across these beauties at your local box store. And these are so nice and healthy and look absolutely beautiful. Look at the size of this panicle. It's hard to even translate on camera. It is stunning. Now, I had a set of these growing on the either side of my driveway, right behind some driveway walls, but it was a spot that got too windy. And you can see by the size of these blooms, they need quite a bit of support. So if you are going to plant out some of these, you need to stake them well and perhaps pick a spot that does not get too much wind, because they are really stunning. You can see that this one has been pruned really well and already has a really great kind of canopy, really good branching structure, which will balance the tree and also help it be nice and sturdy. So limelight's like full sun, and they like consistent but well draining soil. And these are $129 for a 5.5 gallon size standard tree. They call these the Limelight Standards. Standard is the word for a tree form. I know, it's still summer, but Lowe's has started to get some fall inventory in. And if you are having a heat wave where you are and you're excited for some relief that the fall weather will bring, they have started to receive some fall decor here. So we'll just kind of take a peek at it. We're not going to look at everything because it is still summer, but here is a quick glimpse or a little preview at what Lowe's has in stock for some fall decor. These are some metal stakes that you can stick out on the lawn or in your flower bed. And then they have some of these baskets. This looks like indoor decor. Otherwise, it could get a little soggy and maybe get ruined or faded by the sun. So these are $59.99. Now this is adorable. I love these woven pumpkins. That so pretty. $29.98. And they have some kind of in a rope motif on the other side that we'll take a peek at. And then they also have these really cool black ones that look like they're wired with some LED lights. These are $34.98. These are a plasticky material, so these look like they could go outside. And then the big kind of foamy painted black pumpkins are $24.98. They're pretty good size. And these trucks they had last year too for $29.98. And then they also have these milk cans that you can stick some decor inside. This would probably look really pretty with some of that pampas grass, or even with some corn husks if you have a porch that's protected from the elements. And then look at these cute pumpkins. They're like woodland creatures, a fox and maybe a hedgehog. And then the other pumpkins, $24.98 for those. And here's a quick look at the other side of the pumpkins. These orange ones are $24.98. These look like they have some, do they have lights? This is indoor use. It's just a rattan pumpkin. There are no lights on those, but those are pretty as well. Those are $29.98. I have one that I bought years ago that is rattan like this with some lights weaved through it. I had got it at the Christmas tree shop, which was a store that has closed here now in the Northeast, but I've had it for a long time. Then there's these urn planters that might look pretty on the side of a fireplace or in a outside covered porch. Those are $59.98. These pumpkins I don't like all that much, but they look kind of whitewashed. $59.98. And then these have a little bit of a different shape, and those are $39.98. Now, yeah, the price on these is a little bit high. These feel pretty heavy though. These are like a porcelain material, but just keep in mind that this is something that you can buy and have for years to come. I keep most of my decor for years and years, and just kind of cycle around things, and then they look new every year. And this is a really pretty woven one, 9.5-inch woven pumpkin in this orange color. And that is $24.98. So see, that price doesn't seem bad for that size pumpkin. Some more black ones, and here are those small woven ones. These are really cute. $19.98 for these. That would look so cute with that other woven one back there, and combined with those orange ones. Look at that. I love that. There are also some pretty wreaths. Now the wreaths are $29.98, and there's all different ones. I like this one here a lot. Look at that. And these little ladders that you can lean against a wall on a porch. Again, I would probably only stick these on covered porches, but this one is really pretty. $44.98 for this ladder here. And some dark side of the moon astilbe. Now, the thing that's unique about this astilbe is that traditionally, astilbe has been known as a shade plant. But then Proven Winners went ahead and bred this one that can handle sun and shade. And it has this really beautiful dark foliage. And the blooms, which mine have finished blooming about a month ago, now I would say, are like a pink kind of lavender color. Really pretty. Now, astilbes are generally pretty easy to grow. What you should know about them is that they do like a pretty moist soil, and they're also heavy feeders. So in order for them to bloom best in late winter, very early spring, you want to give them a feed with some fertilizer. I like an all-purpose plant fertilizer like the Espoma Plant Tone. It's a granular fertilizer. You would go ahead and just kind of scratch it into the soil around the base of the plant, and that would be feeding the plant for the season and provide it with enough energy to produce some really beautiful blooms. I really love the dark foliage on this astilbe. So here are the specs on the dark side of the moon astilbe. This container here is a 1 gallon for $15.98. You can see it has a mounded growth habit. It likes full sun or full shade, and it gets to be 20 to 22 inches in height, needs 24-inch spacing, and it is hardy in zones 4 through 9 or down to -30 degrees Fahrenheit. And it blooms mid to late summer. And here is the inside nursery clearance rack, and they have a sumac. So this is the Tiger Eyes sumac. Now this one is called Cutleaf Staghorn Sumac. Now these I have heard can drop seed and can start growing babies everywhere. I'm not sure about this variety by First Editions, but it does have a really beautiful showy color in the fall. And this one here, it gets to be 6 feet height, 6 feet wide, deer resistant, and hardy in zones 4 through 8. It says it is drought tolerant, and at $28 it would be 50% off at just $14. And you can see the foliage here has a really nice kind of ferny texture. Look at this other great find on the clearance rack. This is the Boom Chocolata Perennial Geranium by Proven Winners. Now this is a really popular geranium as of the last couple of years. It's a great variety, has a bit of a different colored foliage, a little bit darker with these really pretty purple blooms. This one actually still has some blooms on it. There you go. It's like a light lavender bloom. And these are watered and they look relatively healthy. You would just have to cut them back, plant them in your garden, and they would come back beautifully for you next year because they're a perennial. So it likes full sun, part sun. And these would be half off at about $8. And they get 24 to 26 inches in height and 28-inch spacing. Hardy in zones 4 through 8 or down to -30 degrees Fahrenheit. The Boom Chocolata Geranium. And some Rose of Sharon. There are a couple of varieties here at this store. This one is by Proven Winners, and it is the Lavender Chiffon. And here you can see Lavender Chiffon Rose of Sharon. Now in the past, some of the older varieties of Rose of Sharon were pretty invasive because they drop a lot of seeds and then you end up with Rose of Sharon babies everywhere. Now I'm not sure if that is the case with this one. A lot of the newer varieties have been bred to be sterile, but this one here likes sun. It is hardy in USDA growing zones 5 through 9 or down to -20 degrees Fahrenheit, and it gets to be 8 to 12 feet tall and 4 to 6 feet wide, and it is long blooming. Look at those blooms. That is beautiful. They have a very tropical look, very similar to a hibiscus. And these here are a 2 gallon container for $27.98. And they have another variety a little bit down more called Ruffled Satin. And the Ruffled Satin Rose of Sharon has a bit more of a mauvey kind of rose pink coloring. You can see here, just starting to open up. And this variety, the Ruffled Satin, see how large this one gets. 8 to 12 feet tall, 6 to 10 feet wide, hardy in zones 5 through 9 or down to negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit. Heat tolerant and long blooming. And when it's all in bloom, look how beautiful that looks when it's a larger shrub. Really makes an impact in your mid to late summer garden. And these are 2-gallon containers for $27.98. Here's a fun little pom-pom I just found. This is another one of those topiary kind of standards, and they've made it out of a cypress fern spray gold, similar to what I did with mine, except that mine is multi-trunk. But look how cool that is. I love this kind of wild spreading growth habit. And this one is $129. And when you plant it, you see how it kind of leans. You would just want to adjust it in the hole so that it looks a bit straighter, and you can even stake it to make it a bit straighter. Well, that brings us to the end of the August inventory here at Lowe's. I hope that you've enjoyed checking out what this store has in stock, and I hope that you can find some of these varieties near you. Thank you for spending your time with me, and I will catch you in the next one. Thanks for watching this video. If you liked it, please hit the thumbs up button, and please consider subscribing so you don't miss any of my future videos. And we'll see you soon.